Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. 3.
Okay, ready?
Go ahead and do the count off.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Awesome.
Internet. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
awesome.
just a
Okay.
podcast. Podcast hygiene is always like you gotta do the count.
Yeah. I used to do something like this in person a lot, but obviously we don't live in that world anymore. So.
Not at least for a few months, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so I'm just gonna kind of lead us in, and then we'll just kind of go and have some fun. How does that sound?
Sounds perfect.
All right, well, here I am with Michelle Rapp. Been very excited to speak with you about basically everything you do. Been a big fan of yours on Twitter.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Been following your Fast and Furious journey. That's been
Thank you.
That's been fun. Those movies, they're kind of like the old Star Trek movies. It's like every other one is like good and then like not so good, but then they kind of bring it back a little bit.
I actually really I would disagree in some sense, because I think the Fast and Furious movies are entirely unapologetic in any way, whereas I feel like there's a sense of bashfulness in some of the old Star Trek movies. Like I feel like there's some self-awareness, whereas like every Fast and Furious movie, Vin Diesel and The Rock are just like they're committed. Like everyone in the cast is 100% committed, and I have to respect that.
That's true. I don't think there's a role The Rock has ever taken where he wasn't fully just in it.
100%.
To win it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One of the things I did love was the fact that they did a call back to Fast and Furious Fast 5, I think, about the Rock being way too shiny. He was so shiny. I'm just like,
a very shiny man.
Well, I'm just, you know what? Not everyone takes the time to moisturize, so good on him. Good on him.
You know what? When you have a body like that, you got it's the little things that make the difference.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta. So, this is not a Fast and the Furious podcast, though. That is a great spin-off idea.
Yes.
Like The Rock and Jason Statham spin-off as well. See?
Oh yeah, Hobbs and Shaw. Right? Yeah.
Hobbs and Shaw. It was and that was a movie for another time.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so this is a project I was, like a lot of people, being stuck inside during the pandemic, kind of put together for something to do. There was the Wizards Mythical Greenlight project that a lot of people looked into, and I spent a lot of time working on something, and when no one really knows what happened to that, but I just decided, you know what, I've put together this idea, so why not go ahead and just try to do it anyways, And for me, Magic the Gathering has been part of my life since junior high. It's not just a game, but it's a community. And when I've come back to it most in probably the past few years, I think with stuff like Twitch, the community has exploded. And what I find interesting is people who, it's not just people who play the game, it's people who, create content. But there's so much content outside of just streaming, playing the game. And that's why I'm really excited to have you on, because you have entertained what I think is one of the coolest aspects of Magic, is the Vorthos community.
Thank you.
The ideal. So like for me, there was always, there was the Timmies, the Johnnies, and the Spikes, which is the big creature players, the combo players, and like the tournament grinders. But coming back now and hearing people like just be really interested in the lore and the myth of Magic, it was like, that's really cool because it's such a dense property. It's been around so long. There's so much to it. So I guess to get started, you started playing Magic in 2014, I believe. I think that's what you...
Yeah, no, that's basically pretty well known at this point. I started fairly late in comparison to a lot of my colleagues, for sure.
What was...
Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Everything kind of blurs together.
Yeah,
what was the big set, or I get what were the sets at the time that really you started playing with?
Yeah, no, basically what happened is I walked in my first week at the startup 2 months later, it imploded. But at the time, I walked in. Maybe part of the reason why they imploded is because they spent a lot of money on like booster boxes. But I came in and they actually had just like an entire bookshelf of like booster boxes, mostly stuff that had come out in the past couple of years. So we're talking the entire Tarkir block, as well as the core set for that year, which is Origins, and also some Theros. So I remember like my friend they sat me down. They like just started grabbing packs from all these boxes. So like I ended up with 16 packs, and they were just like, just open all of this, and I'll help you make a deck. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. This is interesting. Wait. And I remember thinking like, wow, 16 packs. This is so luxurious. This is very like, whoa. And I remember being so enamored by the art, the fact that and that was sort of my hook into the game. My friend basically walked me through the lore of Tarkir, and it was really cool because at the time, the group that was really championing the game within the startup I was part of was the LGBTQIA like group basically within the company, and it was also just majority. Most of the folks there were also like people of color. So of course there was a lot of discussion about Alusha. There was a lot of discussion about the fact that Tarkir was a continental Asian set, which was super cool and interesting. And I really felt like I could see myself like in this game for the first time. I had been acquainted with Magic before. However, it was always something that people who didn't look like me played. So I always kind of disregarded it. But looking at these cards, realizing what had happened and like the progression of story and setting since then really helped me realize, oh, hey, this game has kind of grown up a little bit into something that's pretty cool. So why not get a little bit more involved? And then like most things I get very interested in, such as Stardew Valley 2 days ago, I kind of went in on the deep end, and now I'm just like, but yeah, that's kind of my Magic player origin story. I feel like I made up for a lot of time within the next 2 years for sure.
That's great. I mean, that's the kind of the coolest thing too, is everyone's origin story tends to be they stumbled upon it, or someone's like, hey, check this out. Or I had introduced, because in junior high we had 2 different lunch periods, and one semester all my good friends were in a different period, so I kind of met another group of friends who all played Magic, and I just started playing with them. And that's how I learned the game, just sitting outside, playing unsleeved cards on the cement, and just not exactly understanding the rules, but like being enamored with the complexity of like the creatures and how it's everything interacted, but how easy it was to kind of get started. Tarkir. I played Theros. I thought from if you want to talk about like a lore and from a Vorthos period, that I was really into the Theros block. Thought that was Greek mythology has always been really interesting. So that's cool. And I think a lot of people are coming to realize that like, representation matters a lot. It's in really all media. And it's slowly but surely kind of eking its way out there, but it's amazing when like you see people who's like, oh yeah, like I can see myself in this game or in this world, how much of a just a shift it is, and like the enjoyment someone can get out of a piece of media. It's I think it's very important. So speaking to that, you got into the game. How long after you started playing did you start your podcast? I've been practicing saying this because the Loregoyfs. Loregoyfs?
Yeah, we're the Loregoyfs. It's like
Loregoyfs.
The Loregoyfs. It's like Loregoyfs but with lore. We were very proud of that pun.
It's a good pun. No,
thank you.
I actually am surprised it's not an uncard yet. Like it seems like a card Mark Rosewater would.
Oh yeah.
On the nose.
Power and toughness is equal to the number of cards with flavor text you have in your graveyard. Like that should be totally a thing. Like I'm just Perfect. There we go. Actually, no. Most of my friends who are designers don't listen to this. Don't just bleep out that part. But yeah, we started in about 2015, so not too long after I started. It just feels that long because when you work in startups, like the fact that you've been a part of startup time is like real time but condensed into like 10x. So like 1 year is like equal to like 5 years or 10 years at another company because it's so intense, and so many things happen during that time. So it always feels like there was a big gap, at least in my mind, between when I started and when I started on the podcast. So the podcast started around like 2015 roughly, and it literally was just a couple of friends of ours just standing at the tables like right before FNM, and we were just joking about Magic Story, like, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be hilarious if such and such happened? And at the time, I think it was Kaladesh that had just come out or was starting to be previewed, and we were really excited about the set. We were really excited to understand what was going on. Also, like, how the heck is like a giant Leonin like Leonikajani able to disguise himself adequately within a city that has no cat people, which to speak. So just sort of playing around with a little bit of the absurdities of the story, but in, of course, a very caring and loving way. And we thought that there was definitely room to create mostly a comedy podcast that also had room for delving into, I guess, analysis of the lore. One of the things that we wanted to do as a podcast, my co-host and I, were basically to try to steer away from so much of the, I guess, archival or basically like historical or like trivia based Vorthos content that's out there, because I kind of feel like in my opinion a lot of that stuff is very intimidating for a lot of people, and we wanted to make something that was very accessible. Like, for example, we're not, I don't think anyone on the podcast, including myself, is going to say like, oh yes, this is the card that like where Teferi did the thing and the stuff, and we weren't really about that. We wanted to be kind of more of a college humor, SNL sort of like witty writing banter kind of thing, with, of course, clever and insightful ideas as part of the whole package.
I think it was you. I caught one episode, and it was the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song.
Oh my god, yeah, Tibble, yes.
It worked out perfectly because I had just finished rewatching that whole series.
Oh my gosh.
And my wife and I, usually we watch stuff and we always skip the intro. So I'm like, you never skip the intro to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yes.
You always listen to it all the way through. So when that one came on, I was like, dang, this is really good. I was like, this is very impressed. Like, this is awesome.
Well, creating like parody songs is just something that I love. I'm a huge musical fan, and awesome. I adore Weird Al. So I feel like a lot of that is like in my comedic heritage as far as coming up with the kind of stuff is concerned. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I also get a lot of exercise with that skill at home because my husband and I would just make up songs about our cats all the time. It's a nice way to keep that muscle working.
Well, that's good. I mean, any way you can flex the creative muscle. My wife will be the first to tell you that I flex it too often. It's like, I don't know if it's just part of being a creative is you start projects and you start projects and you start projects. My problem is I never finish any of them. So it's always like trying to find the next thing that kind of holds your attention and can really like get you to that place of like, yes, like I've made something, I've created something. So
yeah, and
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So
that level of commitment was definitely something that we also prioritized when we were making the podcast. That's one of the reasons why, like, I'm really proud to say that we were one of the longest running Vorthos podcasts, if not the longest, for a really long time. Mostly because when we met, it was a little bit like a constitutional convention kind of a situation, or like maybe I don't know, like a 1776 declaration where we're like all four of us got in the same room, five of us got in the same room, and we were like, it was my living room, which is right over there, and we were like, this is what we want to do, here are our goals, here is the time commitment we're willing to make every week, here are the rules around when the tone that we're going to set, this is the kind of language we're going to avoid. This is the kind of attitude we want to embody. And I think that sense of like organization and commitment is what helped us keep going for so long, even when story was like not there. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's tricky and it's hard, and any group project is like herding cats. So I'm
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty happy with the legacy that we've sort of left at, for now.
Yeah, I mean, over 150 episodes. I mean, that's to do anything close to that. It's that's remarkable. Like that's a testament to your guys's um, just your effort and your collaboration. Like I was going through. I was like, man, this is like crazy. That's a lot of work. Over the course of however you usually do it. Like that's some dedication.
Yeah.
And when you think about it's dedication to a card game. So it's not even, you think about, oh, Magic's a card game, it's a playing card game. It's not like, oh yeah, we did on different strategies, and you said no. It's diving into like the lore and the story aspects of the card game even more so. So like, I think that for me, that's which I love, like that interest and dedication to story. And I think that's a topic that people overlook sometimes, the importance of story and like well-written story and well-written characters. I think you, of all people, really understand the importance, because I believe I saw you DM a lot, right? You
Yes.
do some DMing for.
Yes.
You just finished something, I think, with was it Loading Ready?
Yes,
Run?
I did just finish it. So I just did my first multi-part campaign stream with Loading Ready Run. We did Queer as Hell, which was an idea that was half-baked that I threw out there in a tweet, and Kathleen really liked it. And she got up in my DMs and was like, hey, do you want to do this? I'm like, yes, yes. So that's how we ended up making a parody of Queer Eye, but in hell, with a bunch of bards, with 5 bards, which I'm very pleased with. And I already have plans in my head, like if you ever want to go back, I have some ideas. But yeah, I love story, and that's one of the reasons why I've been recently very attracted to the art, like TTRPGs, and just the ability to create story in a collaborative setting. I think in a lot of ways, I think at the heart of it, story is, and literature, that's just a reflection of, I think, the soul of humanity in a lot of ways. And when we don't have that reflected in, or if we lack it in something, I think its absence is very much felt. And I think things, whatever product comes out feels a lot less personal, feels a lot less intimate. So, that's one of the things I really enjoyed about Magic for the longest time, the fact that it could take something as complex and as deep as the color pie, its various philosophies, as well as, some of the very touching stories that we saw, and distill it into really interesting and cool gameplay. Yeah, like for example, and then it's really cool to even see that play out, like on the board. Like I remember for, what was it? Eldritch Moon, the Pro Tour, it ended up being like between Emrakul, the Promised End, and Liliana, Last Hope, and it was like, this is so cool. It's zombies versus Eldrazi, just like the story. So it was really, really fun, and I really enjoyed all of those parts of the game.
That's cool. Yeah, I've dabbled with like DMing with my friends, and a lot of times it's like, hey, we should play, Dungeons and Dragons, or we play a very streamlined version called Space Kings, and they're always like, oh yeah, Drew, let's play. Like, how about like next week? And it's like, I mean, we can, but you're asking me to create an entire story. It's like, if I'm gonna do, and I think you probably would agree, if you're gonna do it, like, we're gonna do it right. I'm gonna flush this out. We're gonna have, we're gonna have a setting. We're gonna have characters. We're gonna have motivations. Like, we need to go into this because that's part of the experience, and that's what makes it fun for the DM and the players, is when you get the interaction of like the cooperative story building, because you can build the story however you want as a DM, but if the players decide, no, we're going to do this thing I didn't consider, then like, well, it's usually better to try to go with the flow as much as you can, because that's when you get the really interesting kind of story beats.
Yeah, it's definitely, as a DM, it's so tricky, because there's so many times where you want to be, there's definitely a narrative that you want to present. But then it's always like weighing that against the enjoyment of your players. And I think it also depends like what kind of campaign. For example, I have like a long ongoing Ravnica High campaign that I've been doing for a while. And we're about halfway through. I have the major story beats all mapped out. But one thing I do try to have is a sense of flexibility about how we reach those goalposts, right? So that's been a lot of fun, and I've been trying my best to keep my players happy with, you know, the way their PCs are, and empower them and their PCs to like really shine and be themselves. On the other hand, though, you do have games like, for example, Honey Heist, which is another game I did for Loading Ready Run, where it's extremely loose. You are all bears, and you are trying to commit an enormous heist of honey. So at that point, it's like, it's just all improv, right? Because I mean, the concept is like the base premise is so absurd. Like you can't, there's no way like you can impose a narrative without destroying some of that absurdity, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, I mean, it really depends on the type of session you're looking to have, right? You could have a real free-for-all, like, let's just have a loose idea and let's see where it goes. Or if you're having a little more structure, like to your point, it's a balance where like you want to get your players from, you know, point A to point B, but maybe how you thought they were going to get there is not how they want to get there. So like getting them there is probably, you know, part of the fun of being a DM. It's like, okay, you're going to do this. Like, what can I do to make that, you know, choice lead to where I need them to go to make this story how I want it to play out. So
while also,
it's definitely
while also like balancing things like, well, I'm sorry, but you did something real dumb, and here are the consequences.
That's usually my friends will do something real dumb. I'm like, that was real dumb, and we're gonna punish you in a silly way. But like, my friends like to, they think they're so clever sometimes, and I have to like get them to a point where it's like, no, I don't. We're gonna make sure we keep you humble.
Well, one of my favorite D&D podcasts, which is not another D&D podcast or NADPod, they have D&D Court where people send in questions and they try to resolve them the best way they can in a comedic manner. One of my favorite stories was like, a DM sent us in. He's like, so one of my players is an Aarakocra, and one of the gags that he likes to do is to fly ahead and just take a poop on the next village that they're visiting. And I decided to basically, as a DM, like, make it so that every time he did this, the village that he did this to would become extremely hostile to the party, and the party got really upset. But, you know, am I right in doing this? And I'm like, of course you're right, in my opinion. And some of the podcasts also agreed, like, no, you're right. Like, this is unreasonable. Also, like, they're probably going to start posting up sentries with archers and stuff like that, because I don't think anyone wants a flying Aarakocra or anyone to come in and poop on their home, you know? Like,
no, that does not sound like a good time.
No, it does not. So it's, being a DM is all about just finding that balance, but also, like you mentioned, like sitting down with your group and just establishing that tone right away, making sure that you're all on the same page. So that way, when they walk in, they get what they want, which is, I don't know, maybe it's a Fast and Furious thing as opposed to like, I don't know, Muppet Baby Heist, which is cute, but, you know, not the same as Vin Diesel.
Unfortunately, Kermit the Frog is no Vin Diesel.
No Vin Diesel, but still awesome in his own way. Kermit Baby is he's excellent. That's all I gotta say.
I love the Muppet Babies growing up. I used to watch that all the time. Like that. I can think about my childhood. I used to go to a sitter in the morning before and after school, and like Muppet Babies was like always a constant. That was on. Like, all right, Muppet Babies.
Muppet cool. Babies.
Playing Atari, and they're really into Star Wars, so I was down for that.
Oh my gosh, Muppet! Oh right, I forgot about the Muppet Babies Star Wars episode. That was so cute. I have to go find that.
So, talking about story, one of the biggest reasons I wanted to kind of talk to you was, you know, you, like a lot of us, were very excited for the upcoming Magic set, Strixhaven. You know, wizard school, magic,
owls,
new kind of owls, you know, all this kind of stuff. Like, you know, taking basically, I guess, you know, whether they want to admit it or not, Magic's take on, I guess, almost like a Harry Potter-esque world. And, you know, it was one of those things where I think a lot of people were very excited when it was announced, but as they kind of released more and more story beats, it kind of became another interesting story decision after another. Um, and it's what I really wanted to talk to you about was like we see a lot of times like companies or people will take a story or take a type of character and then put them in sort of the same similar role, a typical trope or stereotype, and it becomes frustrating and becomes going back to the idea of representation. Like representation is cool, but like the type of representation also matters, you know. So I know for you there was the character of Killian, who was very excited to kind of see a main magic face as an Asian character coming out. But as we saw more and more story beats, it kind of fell into that trap of, his father's the dean. He's super strict. He's got, very tiger dad, as it were, vibes. And I guess, for someone, who is invested in the story of magic, like I was really just, what were you thinking when you kind of saw this? Like, how was your development? I kind of saw it as as an unfold on Twitter, but like, what for you? Like, what does that mean to you as someone who was invested, in this sort of character, and again, see him kind of fall into these pitfalls that a lot of storytellers, unfortunately, put them in.
Well, as you mentioned, it was definitely an evolution as we discovered more and more about Killian. It was honestly one of the most agonizing weeks of my life where you just like drip by drip, we see more Killian cards come out and they're all kind of terrible, except one. But even then, there's like still some problematic stuff going on. As far as how I felt, I was definitely bewildered. When that Dicebreaker article came out, I kind of felt like this growing weight like inside that just started sinking. It felt a lot like it felt a lot like like an elevator filling with water and just kind of like slowly descending into your stomach. Because I understand that, of course, Wizards is a company, it's a corporation. And at the end of the day, story is not its main product. And as long as it's not its main product, I don't think we're going to be seeing the amount of investment in the quality of story as we would in, say, like etched foils or whatever, like just or like Secret Lair or something like that. Because those cards and gameplay, I think, is very much more what they want to focus on at the moment. So I understood that was going to be something we were going to see slightly compromised. And I was just not expecting this. And especially after the several weeks we had where we were seeing a rise in Asian American hate, particularly the killings in Atlanta. I think that I myself, as an Vietnamese Asian American person, my tensions were already pretty high. I mean, I was I was kind of scared to go outside for a while. Like when I got my first Pfizer shot, I asked my husband to come with me because I was like, we're heading downtown and I would rather not be assaulted today if possible. So seeing this, especially at such a time, really not only felt like a deep weight in my heart, but also a little bit like a gut punch. Because this was something I never would have expected, given what I had known about the company at the time. And it's honestly, and of course, no demographic is a monolith. And I can only speak from my experiences and my interpretation. But in making Killian I guess basically an oppressed, abused individual, subject to the whims of his overprotective, tyrannical father, that is such a trope that we've seen in media for so long that it's very much, I think, created this broad like brush stroke over the entire community, right? It's gotten to the point where even like what Family Guy had a whole thing about it, or there's even like the
Yeah.
Asian dad meme that was around for a little while.
Oh.
And yes, there are some families there in the Asian American community, including mine, that were like that, but that does not define the entirety of the experience. And the problem is when we don't have a lot of representation in the first place, what's put out there is what people expect. Like, if you only get vanilla and chocolate ice cream for most of your life, and you're never going to expect ice cream to come in any other flavor, right? Like, that's just kind of what happens. So while in isolation, I understand what Wizards and what the writing team was trying to convey with the story, but in the broader context of Asian representation within media, this was definitely a misstep and most certainly a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, especially, I mean, given the timing of the release of everything too, kind of compounds the main issues. But so there was a great article by Ash Parrish from Kotaku.
Yep.
Talking about like we know Wizards can do better. Like they've shown that they have the ability to write non-white characters in interesting ways. Teferi, I think, is a great example of like a very strong main face character for Wizards.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost in a lot of ways just lazy story writing a lot of times, and it kind of gets back to I think about a lot of times, especially in this past year, about like representation matters and words matter, and the way you portray people and the way you talk about people, like, it can have a big effect. And when you're given the opportunity to break outside of a stereotype and a norm, it's such a powerful way to approach a story, because it's I guess it's just not taking the easy way. We can craft more interesting stories if we really try. And it's very frustrating when you kind of see over and over again. And again, to your point, yes, we don't, Wizards as a company, who knows what their storytelling department is like. Maybe it's one person that's just, I don't know. But you think at some point, like, you just stop approaching characters that way. You take the extra effort, and like when you challenge the status quo of like how people think of other people, I think it makes more interesting stories, and it's a lot more. I think people accept it a lot more when you're building out this sort of universe. So it's definitely a frustrating thing. You see it again and again in different mediums, and you think at some point someone would be like, yeah, like we're gonna break the mold and do something different. But again and again, it's like it's very hard, and especially given everything that's been going on in the world with this terrible wave of anti-Asian sentiment, everything that's going on. It's just been frustrating that we see opportunities to do better, and they're missed. They're like missed opportunities, and it's someone who is just trying to explore and reach out to people and gather opinions. Like, I can only imagine just what it's like constantly seeing these sort of like just silly mistakes. It seems so obvious, but again, it's missed time over time.
Yeah. I guess just to clarify a couple of things. So it was made known that the writer for Killian was an Asian American person, a woman herself. And so I think that in this case, it was less of a, not that it doesn't happen, because obviously lazy storytelling happens all the time, and it's very not cool, and it's so not enjoyable. But I think in this case, it was more of not fully understanding the broader context, and also the broader impact and harm that this kind of story would do when it was released. Because I think that Killian's story can be very interesting, right? especially the idea of overcoming your own personal trauma, overcoming your environment of oppression, and being able to find your own strength and identity through that. That is a very powerful story. However, given given his race, which we cannot, we can't overlook. People are like, oh, what if he was white? I'm like, yes, that would be a different story. It's to say, of course it would be a different story, because in the broader context of the world that we live in, the fact that he's Asian colors everything. And that cannot be avoided. So I think it is just a matter of looking at what harm can this do? And I think that's sort of the biggest question, one of the biggest questions that every storyteller with a broad audience needs to ask themselves. What kinds of issues are we going to be up against? What point are we trying to drive home by the introduction of this character? Because, of course, everyone can talk about diegetic versus not diegetic logic, right? What makes sense within the story versus outside the story. When you are choosing to tell this story, these, at the end of the day, are not real people. So the decisions that are being made with that story rest with you, the creator, and thus can be changed. So that kind of responsibility needs to be taken seriously, needs to be examined. The second thing that I'd also like to talk about is the medium through which this story is being told. While Magic the Gathering has a lot of history of presenting really cool story moments and cards, like Nexus of Fate, like that's a really fantastic card, right? Also, oh gosh, a flooded memory of that one card from Ixalan where Jace is like, all my memories are coming back to me. He's having a Celine Dion moment, but he's I love to call those things Celine Dion moments because it makes so much sense. But that does it's possible. It's possible for Wizards to do this. However, a story like this, we also have to remember that these are cards that need to stand alone in their narrative, right? So when we have, for example, Nexus of Fate, we see that in there, this is a confrontation between Ugin and Bolas. We know exactly what that is. It's on the card, and it can tell a story by itself. What we see in Killian's cards, however, like this isn't maybe the best medium for it, like telling the epic story of two epic dragons fighting, one's dead, one's maybe not, and people going back in time, like that's surprisingly, that is a lot easier to put into cards than the highly personal story of overcoming trauma, at least in this way. So we're already seeing like these layers of the story being hamstrung, right? Like one hand, we're not thinking about the broader context. Second hand, on the other hand, we're also not thinking about the fact that these are little playing cards, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to go on there.
It's very true. There was actually another article I saw by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, of all people, big Lakers fan, Orange County, and he talks about when he was younger being trained by Bruce Lee, and how one of Bruce Lee's biggest goals in life was to represent the Asian people as more than just more than as a stereotype, as a strong independent person who could lead, who could be the lead in a movie without just the classic pitfalls of an Asian actor. And you think about, and he makes a comment, he's like, when I trained with Bruce Lee 55 years ago, and he makes a comment like, that's, it's been that long, and he was still he was working at it then, and we're still coming back to trying to overcome those obstacles. Oh yeah. It's you gain an inch and you lose a mile, and you just keep pushing forward, and it's easy. I guess it comes back, and I kind of keep harping on this, but representation matters. It's important to see people and things you're interested in. I think that's an important part of society that it's really easily dismissed by can be easily dismissed by people it's kind of a silly thing, but no, it's I think it does make a big difference when you can see someone, you can relate to them, like, oh yeah, like I see myself in that person, you know,
Yeah.
like I see, and I think that's, you know, I think fantasy especially sometimes has a hard time grappling with that, and we're starting to see some pushback, and I think there are inroads being made, but it's just frustrating, especially with a game as big as Magic. It's just, you know, it's such a broad audience. There's so many people who involved and so many people like playing the game. You just, you know, you want everything, you know, you always want it to be perfect, but you're never going to get it, but you want that progress.
Absolutely. One thing I like to talk about is the Uhura effect, which is there was a really great anecdote, a story that Whoopi Goldberg told many, many times when she decided to go become an actor, of seeing Uhura in the first Star Trek. And that, it meant so much. Oh my gosh, why can't I remember the actress right now? I'm so sorry. I feel bad. I have a Star Trek tattoo and I can't remember. In my defense, I haven't had a lot of sleep. But what was really remarkable about that story was the fact that Whoopi was incredibly inspired by this person as a child. You know, she told her, she like pointed at the TV screen and told her mother, like, look, mommy, it's a black woman who isn't a servant.
Yeah.
she's like doing stuff. She's like being smart, and she is being given power and command, and, you know, she's respected. She's not there to clean up anyone's mess. She's there to help the team like succeed on its away missions and all that stuff. And and for the time, I mean, that was amazing. And to the point where I believe the like Martin Luther King, this actress like was thinking about leaving. I'm actually going to look this up now because this is going to bother me by the end of Nichelle Nichols. Thank you. Thank you, the internet. Nichelle Nichols was actually approached by Martin Luther King to continue this role because it was such an important role model for so many black people, so many people of color. And I think that's what is, I think, the heart of what good representation should be. Not only should it reflect what can be, but also how things are now, and what, like, who we are now. You know, it's so not only, for example, in the case of Uhura, was it showing a black woman in a position where she's, you know, displayed as being competent and smart and respected. But and at the time, maybe a lot of folks were thinking, oh, that's so far away. Like, who could even think about something like that? I think the character still reflected a lot of the realities of what it was like being a black woman, in terms of black women are smart. They are amazing. They're competent. And seeing that reflected on the screen makes you realize, I could do that. Right? Yeah. And I think that's what we need. You know, we need to show people that people of color, marginalized folks, when you see us like on the screen, when you see us in a book, when you see us anywhere else, we're not just this one flavor. Like, we're not just vanilla, we're not just chocolate. We come in at least 55 different flavors. Like, we are like the ultimate Baskin Robbins. So like, so it is that's why it's so important to show especially like Asian American men as being desirable and being masculine, like Han. Like, this is why I'm always like, if you ever follow my Twitter, I'm like, you know, I'm a Han stan. I cannot help but stan Han. But he is such an amazing piece of representation for our Asian Americans. Like, he's freaking hot. He is so good at driving. He is funny. He has great taste in snacks. Like, it's just a great character. And that is what we need more. We need more Hans and less Killian.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. And the Uhura, that's a great example of like the importance of just seeing yourself reflected in other sort of positions that maybe you didn't think were attainable. Yeah. I think that's a very compelling point for seeing more of those sorts of characters.
Yeah. Like, Han doesn't know martial arts. Like, he doesn't martial arts. He's not an academic scholar. He's not a doctor. He's not a lawyer. He's not a dentist. He's not a pharmacist. He's a really good driver.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate having you on and being able to talk to you about this. I actually did catch you on the Goblin Lore podcast as well.
Yeah, they're great. I love them so much. They're wonderful people.
So I definitely I'll link that. That was another really good discussion you guys had on there. Very insightful on kind of some of these issues. Yeah, that was a fun listen. So I'm definitely. Your Twitter is always very interesting to kind of keep up with. I'm glad you like the Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley is definitely a fun way to kill some time. Before we wrap up, so part of my goal for everything is building better community. That's kind of what I'm trying to do with all this. So one of the things I'm going to do, I know. So as of right now, your podcast is currently on a hiatus, correct? Mm-hmm. You guys are still kind of. Yeah, I guess trying to decide what you may want to do, or just taking some time.
Yeah,
understandable. It's been a hell of a year for everybody for the most part. So.
Yeah, it's been like there's a lot of like in-house stuff that happened in terms of like, everyone like people's personal health and also family stuff. So it was really hard to make that work. In addition to just Strixhaven and Killian being a whole flaming hot mess. So we're just gonna take a break and see what happens.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, what I'm going to do in the meantime, regardless of what you guys end up to decide, if you keep it with it, if you think about this, I'm going to join your Patreon. So the Show and Tell Show will be an official supporter of the Loregoyfs podcast, because I want to be able to, as I have people on, like, to build that community. And I have a really low quality community board that I'm going to put up after the interview, and people kind of take a look. And my goal is to hopefully add to that community board as I reach out to more content creators and magic people. So I look forward to seeing whatever you guys decide to do, if you come back or if you pivot to something else, or if you just decide to do something entirely new. I'm sure whatever it is, it's going to be awesome.
Thank you. That's very kind. But
again, literally the least I could do. So again, I want to thank you for spending some time with me. I really appreciated having you on. I really appreciated your perspective. I hope people can take something away from this, and keep not talking. You changed your Twitter name. It was Michelle can't stop talking about racism. That's good. We need those voices. Like, you can't when people are quiet. That's when things go wrong. So I'm glad you're out there and you're not worried about putting your opinion out there. I think that's very important.
I've been joking that I think my familiar is less of an owl and more of a possum, because I just keep screaming. I feel like I'm just like, like inside the dumpster fire that was 2020. I feel like, or just a screaming possum is pretty much how I felt like. I don't know. That was me. That was just me that whole year, and also now.
We didn't touch it. I have it. It'll be in your little Playbox. But anyway, if you get a chance, go check out Michelle's Instagram. Check out her pottery. It's awesome. I love the new possum mug you just put out. It was great.
Yeah, no, I'm just so happy. Like, I got obsessed with possums because of NADPOD, and there's a really, really cute possum there that y'all should paw. He's so cute. But ever since then, I've been like, the more I learn about possums, the more I'm like, these are really cool creatures. Like, we need to respect these little ones a lot more, because like they can't get rabies easily. They eat ticks, which give us Lyme disease. Like, they're great.
Yeah. Possums, I think, get a bad rap a lot of times, but they're one of those animals that, like, no, they're actually really good. They're actually really cool once you kind of look into like what they add to the environment.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, and that they're the only they're the only native North American marsupial. Like, that's I don't. Anyway, subscribe to Possum Facts here with me, Michelle Rapp. Hashtag Possum Facts.
There you go. Perfect. All right. Well, again, thanks again, Michelle. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to your rest of your Fast and Furious journey.
Thank you so much, Drew. It's been a pleasure.
All right. We'll catch you guys soon.
All right. Take care. Bye.